Hi, I'm Scott Giles, and welcome to Power Talk, my podcast here on Facebook Live and YouTube. I cover topics related to spirituality, hypno-coaching, and the hypnotic arts and sciences generally. If you'd like to know more about my professional work, and I hope you do, check out my website, which I'll tag at the end of this video. Today I want to talk about the whole concept of sin, and what the fact that this concept arose tells us about human nature. Now, first, sin is usually defined as an immoral act that is a transgression of divine law. Now, that's a big idea, and organized religion has made a lot of the claim that people commit sins and God forgives them by providing some sort of celestial get out of jail free card. As many have noticed over the centuries, sin is good for business if you're running a church. And remember, as you hear me say this, I am a clergyman. Now, in the poem, For the Time Being, poet W.H. Auden says, I like committing crimes, God likes forgiving them. Really, the world is admirably arranged. A priest I know was once quoted with a parallel quip. He said, I like sinning, God likes forgiving, we get along just fine. Now, while all this is humorous, the problem with the definition of sin as a transgression of divine law is the related question, which divine law are we talking about? The one about murder? Or the one that says people shouldn't get tattoos and that men shouldn't cut their hair or shave? And it does say that. In Leviticus chapter 19:28, you'll read, You shall not round off the hair on your temples, nor mar the edges of your beard, or tattoo any marks upon you. Now, those things, cutting your hair, shaving, trimming your beard, or getting a tattoo, doesn't seem quite comparable to, say, committing murder, but that is what the Bible says. Philosophers call this the problem of moral equivalence. Not all bad things really are equally bad. Some are worse than others, and often we don't have a good calculus that lets us weigh them. And times change. In ancient times, when people in the Middle East worshipped a deity called Moloch, it was normal for young couples to take their firstborn children and toss them into the lap of a heated bronze idol and let the infants die of heat and fire. This was considered praiseworthy behavior at the time, although no one would regard it as such now. As the ancient Hebrew religion evolved, it condemned the practice. We read in 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 10, so that no one would make a son or daughter pass through fire as an offering to Moloch. But that doesn't take away the fact that once upon a time, killing your firstborn children was considered the right thing to do, and sheltering them from that death was the sin. Now, there are many such examples. As religious philosophy evolved, things that were once considered sinful transgressions of divine law changed. So, what exactly does the concept of sin mean? Obviously, it's a word used to condemn something which is considered wrong at the time, even if in an earlier or perhaps a later time that moral judgment would be different. In Renaissance times, a secular notion of what sin might mean developed. Theologians actually tried to sort out the various forbidden behaviors in the Bible, like trimming one's beard, into categories of what was really bad versus what wasn't so bad and could be sort of overlooked. They came up with what they called the 7 deadly sins. And we see their influence in literary work like Dante's Divine Comedy or Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. The 7 deadly sins are pride, envy, gluttony, sloth, lust, avarice, and wrath. If you want to recall them easily, they form an acronym of the 2 words Pegg's Law. Pride, envy, gluttony, sloth, which means laziness, lust, avarice, which means greed, and wrath. You can find things in the Bible that correspond to the 7 deadly sins, but they're really a more modern summation of the things the Renaissance thinkers thought were not nice. When philosophers discuss ethics, there is something called the Boo Hara Theory. That is, when people say something is praiseworthy, they really mean it's something they approve of. They're sort of saying hurrah. When they say something is bad or sinful, they really mean it's something they disapprove of. Once upon a time, sacrificing children to Moloch was regarded as praiseworthy. People said hurrah when they did it to their children. Later, people came to see that identical behavior as blameworthy, and so they said boo. They said it was sin. Now, this is a vast simplification of ethical thought, but especially in theology, the Boo Hara theory is substantial. The whole concept of things that were once considered sinful, like trimming one's beard, but were later no longer considered so, is really fully explained by this theory. Sin has more to do with a state of public opinion than anything else. We see this in modern times with one group of people who call themselves pro-life and believe abortion is sinful, while another group considers the matter differently and arrives at a completely different judgment. To a substantial degree, saying something is sinful is saying boo with regard to it, while saying something is praiseworthy or right is just another way of saying hurrah. Now, when I titled this podcast Enjoy Sin, I did it as a way of indicating that what some regard as sin is really quite relative to the state of public opinion. I do trim my beard. I enjoy having a well-shaped beard. I think having a well-shaped beard is at worst a neutral thing. It may even be praiseworthy if one believes in good grooming. People talk about sin as if it represented a moral absolute, but historically it doesn't. It's just a way of saying boo. Thousands of years ago, the ancient Hebrews said boo about my well-manicured beard. It doesn't really mean anything more than that. So what does mean something morally and ethically? Well, first, we have to realize that the understanding of what is praiseworthy or blameworthy changes over time and over places. We just think our way is best. Activist Saul D. Alinsky, in his 1971 book, Rules for Radicals, wrote, "It is a world not of angels, but of angles, where men speak of moral principles, but act on power principles. A world where we are always moral and our enemies are always immoral. The point of this podcast is that we all need to have some ethical humility. There are very few absolutes in the world, but there is a temptation to take the things we regard as praiseworthy and identify them as absolutely right, and to take everything that we regard as blameworthy and identify it as sinful and wrong. But the history of ethics shows us that this is probably not correct. I mean, it's great to know what you think is right and what you think is wrong, but have some humility and realize that no matter how passionately you may believe you are right, people looking back from the future could decide that you were wrong. So be slow to condemn others and embrace the understanding that sin may not be what you think it is. Hey, thank you for your time and attention today. I'll be back next week with another talk on a different subject, and I'd like to invite you to join me. It does help me if you let others know about my videos, so please like, share, and subscribe. And if I can be of help to you, feel free to reach out. Stay well and stay safe.